When you step into this slum in Phnom Penh, the first thing you notice isn't the smell of garbage. It's the silence. No one asks you for anything. No one begs for help. You don't hear complaints. You just see routines, the kind built out of necessity and choice. And number 1. Beung Trobek Slum. When you turn off the main road in Phnom Penh, just past the bright noodle stands, you won't see a sign, but Beung Trobek appears anyway. Cambodia's capital is home to more than 2 million people, but nearly 40% of those living in urban areas are in slum conditions. Based on reports from the United Nations Habitat and Habitat for Humanity as of the year 2023. And you're stepping into one of those invisible neighborhoods. Under your feet, the pavement ends. It gives way to muddy paths and splintered wooden boards. Open drains run straight alongside ramshackle homes. Next door, someone boils rice over a tiny fire. The smell of smoke blends with the scent of stagnant water. In the rainy season, these same paths flood parts of Beung Trobek can become muddy rivers, pushing families to balance their lives precariously above the puddles. Here, homes are built from tin scrap wood plastic sheets, whatever people could salvage. Cloth lines stretch overhead, dripping with laundry. Children duck through narrow spaces between walls barefoot or in worn slippers. And despite being just a few kilometers from modern buildings, this cluster of shelters exists outside the city's maps and services. But this isn't a new phenomenon. The roots of Phnom Penh's slum settlements stretch back nearly 5 decades. In 1975, when the Khmer Rouge seized power, they emptied the capital in just 3 days, dismantling property ownership and sending families into rural exile. When the regime fell in 1979, survivors returned to Phnom Penh only to find that their homes and rights had been erased. With no titles or official land claims, many settled on public land along rivers, lakes, and drainage canals like Beung Trobek. Throughout the 1980s and beyond, waves of rural migrants continued arriving. Climate change, frequent droughts, and unstable farm work pushed families to seek opportunity in the city. But Phnom Penh wasn't built to receive them, and so neighborhoods like this one emerged. You might wonder why this matters. It matters because slum conditions correlate with health risks. Only 55% of urban Cambodians have access to improved sanitation. And those in slums face malaria, waterborne diseases, chronic malnutrition. Nearly 70% of children under 5 in some slums suffer from. We'll be diving deeper into the stories of the women who call Beung Trobek home, how they cope, protect their families, and keep going despite the challenges. But before we go there, what's the first thing that strikes you in this scene? Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Number 2. Who lives here? If you spend even a few minutes walking these alleys, you'll notice who's around the most. It's women. Some sitting quietly behind baskets of fruit. Some sorting plastic in the shade, others washing clothes in metal tubs just outside their doors. No one announces what they're doing. It just happens quietly on repeat. You see Danny near a corner where laundry lines crisscross above puddles. She's focused on preparing cups of sugarcane juice for a group of local kids. The machine creaks as she turns the handle, pressing the stalks by hand. She's in her early 30s, raising 2 children on her own. Her husband left 4 years ago. Since then, she's done whatever work she could find. And lately that means selling sugarcane drinks from a small cart. Next door, a grandmother keeps watch over a toddler while boiling rice on a charcoal stove. Her daughter works 12 hours a day at a garment factory on the edge of Phnom Penh. They rarely see each other during the week, but the older woman tells you she's grateful. At least she has a job, she says, and my granddaughter still goes to school. According to the Cambodian Ministry of Planning, as of early 2024, more than 60% of households in informal urban areas are either led by women or rely primarily on a woman's income. Many of these women came from rural provinces, places like Kampong Cham Pre Veng or Svai Rieng, in search of better opportunities. Some ended up in factories. Others, like Danny, built their lives here with whatever work they could find. There are no formal childcare services, no health clinics, no social workers. But within the community, people improvise. A neighbor watches your child while you work. A borrowed pan travels house to house. A pot of soup stretches further than expected. These aren't systems in the formal sense, but they function because they have to. Later, we'll look more closely at what happens when the sun goes down. When the rain comes, the streets flood, and the cracks in daily life. Number 3. Extremely poor living conditions. Not far from Phnom Penh's new shopping centers and office towers, a dark, slow-moving canal cuts through one of the city's most fragile communities. On the maps, it's called Beung Trobek. In reality, it's something more raw. A drainage channel carrying everything from rainwater to raw sewage straight into the lowland wetlands south of the capital. The smell is sharp and constant thickest when the tide is low and the water doesn't move. In certain sections, high-rise apartments stand along its banks. Despite the odor, these buildings are considered livable, part of the city's expanding middle-class footprint. But just a few hundred meters downstream, the scenery begins to shift. The concrete edges give way to crumbling soil. Narrow paths become soft with mud. The canal widens, but not in a clean or scenic way. The water here bubbles visibly, stirred by gases rising from decomposing organic waste, much of it human. And over this toxic marsh, makeshift homes stretch out balanced on wooden stilts, patched with sheet metal, plastic tarps, and plywood boards. This section of Beung Trobek is home to roughly 400 people. They live in shelters that range from old concrete rooms to simple huts. Children walk barefoot along planks that cross open water. The ground beneath is thick with garbage and dark liquid. In the dry months, it smells bad. In the wet season, it floods. Floods here aren't just inconvenient, they bring illness. During peak monsoon, when tides rise and push polluted water into homes, community health workers often report spikes in skin infections, stomach disease, and respiratory problems. There's no sewage system, no waste collection, all into the canal. Living like this reshapes your understanding of health. It's not just about hospitals or medicines. It's about the air you breathe, the water you drink, and whether the ground outside your door is dry or soaking. Number 4. Getting around Beung Trobek. As you move deeper into Beung Trobek, the idea of walking becomes something different. What might be a short stroll elsewhere turns into a slow, deliberate process. There are no sidewalks, only narrow dirt paths that shift with every step. In dry weather, dust hangs in the air. But when the rain begins, which it often does during Cambodia's long wet season, everything changes. The alleys become muddy channels, thick with runoff and floating trash. Small footbridges made of scrap wood are placed over flooded corners, but many have sunk or cracked from years of use. Any vehicle with wheels becomes unreliable. Motorbikes stall, handcarts get stuck, and bicycles turn useless within a few meters. You see people carrying their carts or leaving them behind altogether just to reach the main road. By mid-2024 data from the Phnom Penh Urban Poor Federation showed that over 70% of residents in informal settlements like this reported repeated issues with access during rainy months. This isn't just about discomfort. It means missed school-canceled workdays and late hospital visits, consequences that affect entire households. Children walk to school in the early morning, their shoes already soaked by the time they reach the edge of the slum. Their uniforms carry streaks of red-brown clay. Mothers walk alongside them holding one hand over their child's head and balancing a plastic bag of supplies with the other. There is no alternate route. There is no covered walkway. It's one path, and everyone must take it. Even ambulances avoid certain parts of the neighborhood during heavy rain. Local clinics have reported that dozens of patients miss scheduled appointments each month simply because the roads are inaccessible. The ground beneath Beung Trobek doesn't just challenge movement, it shapes the rhythm of life. People plan their errands around the weather. Some delay meals until the streets clear. Others simply stay in place for hours waiting for the mud to dry. When even walking becomes uncertain, what does that say about the systems meant to support daily life? Let me know what you think. How far could you go if the road itself disappeared beneath your feet? Number 5. A cheap glass of hope. The rhythms of daily life in Beung Trobek are shaped not just by the weather or the mud, but also by prices. Small numbers that carry weight. Walk a few meters along the alley and you'll hear the familiar sound of a manual press crushing sugarcane. The juice trickles out into plastic cups sold for about 3,000 Cambodian riel. That's less than $1. On hot days, it's the most common refreshment here. Not because it's loved more than anything else, but because it costs less than everything else. In many parts of Phnom Penh, cafes serve iced lattes for 5 times that price. But here, sugarcane juice isn't just a drink. It's a quiet measure of what people can afford. Most residents don't ask for extras, no lemon, no ice, no fancy packaging. They take what's offered, often paying in exact change. According to estimates from the Cambodian National Institute of Statistics, in the year 2025, more than 40% of households in informal urban settlements earn less than $5 per day. That income must stretch to cover rent, food, school supplies, transportation, and medical costs, often for multiple family members. So when the temperature climbs, a cold drink isn't a choice between sugarcane and soda. It's a question of whether that 3,000 Cambodian riel could be used for rice instead. Small items on sale at neighborhood stalls begin to tell a larger story. A single egg, a used pair of sandals, a packet of instant noodles. Each one priced low enough to sell, but high enough to make people think twice. These aren't just transactions, they're reminders of limitations. And when choice becomes a luxury consumption, reflect survival rather than preference. The market, in its quiet way, reveals the reality of constrained living, not only in what people buy, but in what they never get to consider. Prices in Beung Trobek reflect the line between enough and not enough. Each purchase tells its own version of the same story, one where every coin counts. Numbers, violence, and insecurity. In Beung Trobek, the idea of safety is fragile and rarely guaranteed. Homes here are pieced together from wood, plastic, and metal, with walls so thin they can barely block sound, let alone danger. At night, the paths between houses turn darker than shadow, and the silence that fills them is not peaceful, but tense. There are no police patrols, no security lights, no reinforced doors, only people trying to stay unnoticed. Throughout Phnom Penh's informal settlements, the most common threat comes from inside the home. According to a report from Le Cad Ho in the year 2024, 139 cases of domestic violence were officially recorded across the country, including 23 deaths. But those numbers, sobering as they are, only scratch the surface of what happens behind closed doors. Later that year, 13 civil society organizations publicly urged the Cambodian government to revise the domestic violence law, which has not been updated since it was introduced in 2005. They stated that for more than 8 years, no significant changes had been made, despite strong evidence of persistent abuse. Government-led surveys continue to show extremely high levels of violence and control with women, children, and members of the LGBTIQ+ community affected most often. Inside this slum, the reality behind those statistics becomes more visible. Families live just inches apart. When tension rises, there is nowhere to go and nowhere to hide. Flooded alleys and overcrowded homes push people even closer together during the rainy season. And community workers have noticed spikes in reported incidents whenever space becomes more limited. The absence of privacy turns daily stress into something more volatile. In many cases, people don't call the police. They turn to neighbors, relatives, or simply wait for things to pass. Some are afraid of losing their homes if they speak up. Others worry they won't be believed. Legal protection feels far away, like something meant for a different part of the city. The violence that exists in Beung Trobek is not always loud or visible. It lives in the quiet, in the spaces between walls, in stories that people only tell when they know someone is listening without judgment. Numbers limited access to education. In Phnom Penh's slum settlements, the idea of school often feels distant, not because families don't value it, but because survival comes first. Just after sunrise, long before any school bell rings, small figures walk alongside their parents, headed not for class, but for the edge of the city. The landfill lies more than 30 kilometers from Beung Trobek, but many make that journey daily by foot or truck to earn what they can. The air there carries a chemical weight, a mixture of heat rot and smoke from smoldering fires that never fully burn out. For most adults, the job is a last resort. For children, it becomes the first lesson. How to spot recyclable metal, how to untangle wires from waste, how to work quickly before the midday heat sets in. They grow up knowing what sells and what doesn't, long before they can spell their own names. Few classrooms exist near these communities. The nearest public schools are overcrowded, underfunded, and often too far for children to reach on foot. Even when enrollment is free, the hidden costs like notebooks, shoes, and a school lunch become impossible for families earning less than $5 a day. Most children drop out before they finish primary school. University isn't even a question, it's an idea from another world. A recent community survey, conducted in early 2025 by Open Development Cambodia, found that school attendance in some informal settlements falls below 30% for children over the age of 10. Many begin working before they learn how to read. Others are pulled out of class whenever money runs low. This isn't about neglect. It's about options that never appeared. In these neighborhoods, education is not something you choose. It's something you postpone or surrender because hunger doesn't wait. The future for many gets weighed against today's plastic bottle count. And in that calculation, dreams become currency, and school a luxury too easily lost. Number 8. No residence, no existence. Not every home has a number. Not every resident is on a list. In parts of Phnom Penh, like Beung Trobek, entire communities live in a kind of administrative shadow, present in the city but absent from its paperwork. This is one of the deepest challenges for people here, the absence of legal land ownership. Without formal titles or household registration, families cannot renovate, register property, or access basic public services without extra layers of difficulty. They may have lived on the same plot for 20 years, but without papers, their claim remains fragile. According to a 2025 report by PED, much of the land along Phnom Penh's canals and rivers, especially in areas like Beung Trobek, is either public space designated as water buffers or held by anonymous private interests. As the capital grows rapidly, newcomers continue to arrive, and people settle wherever there is space, along drainage banks, behind factories, even over stagnant water. This legal vacuum creates constant uncertainty. In 2015, more than 400 homes in this area were marked for demolition after the local government announced a plan to preserve the Beung Trobek reservoir. Red paint on doors was the only notice, and for many, it meant losing everything. Today, that memory still shapes daily life. Even a rumor of development can cause panic. A construction fence nearby can trigger fears of eviction. And in a city where land values rise quickly, informal settlements often become the first targets for clearance. Without documents, residents cannot apply for compensation, cannot appeal, and cannot stop what's coming. Their homes stand, but only until someone decides they shouldn't. But people didn't leave quietly. And in those moments where a community without documents still found the strength to resist, another kind of legitimacy was written, not on land deeds, but in collective memory. Number 9. Poverty does not mean giving up. You don't need to understand every word in Khmer to feel what's happening here. A mother laughing while brushing her daughter's hair on a porch made of uneven planks. A teenager crouching beside a friend, fixing the chain on a shared bicycle. A man carrying water back to his home, careful not to spill a drop. If all you see is poverty, then you've missed the most important part. Living with little doesn't mean living without effort. In fact, what stands out most in places like Beung Trobek isn't the lack, it's the persistence. The quiet ways people build normalcy where almost everything else is unstable. We often ask, how can they live like this? But maybe that question says more about us than it does about them. Because the truth is, they're not just surviving here. They're raising children, solving problems, sharing meals, planning futures, all within the limits of what they have. This is not about glorifying struggle. It's about recognizing that life doesn't wait for perfect conditions. And even in places where the roads are broken and the roofs leak when it rains, people are still moving forward. One meal, one laugh, one borrowed notebook at a time. For many of us, travel is about choosing where to go, what to see, and what to leave out. But for those living in these neighborhoods, there is no choice, not even when it comes to their own lives. There's no exit. The noise, the heat, the uncertainty, they don't pass through it. They live inside it, and that is the full story of this slum. So maybe the next time we find ourselves in a place like this, the better question isn't, how can they live here? It's, what have I failed to notice about how full they already are? Living beside water that doesn't drain and roofs that barely hold isn't something anyone would romanticize. But here, people adapt in ways that don't call for pity. Only attention communities like this aren't invisible because they're small. They're invisible because we choose not to look long enough. And maybe, just maybe, looking closely is where change begins. So if this glimpse into Phnom Penh changed something in the way you look at a map or a city, then stay with us. Like this video if it moved you, and subscribe to NVL Travel Documentary to join more journeys beyond the surface. Because seeing the world isn't about finding what's beautiful. It's about understanding what's real.